All right, this is the follow up, and we are following up on a live video I did here on Georgia Space Chat a couple months ago, a couple weeks ago, really, on with the subject being the great Francisco Centeno. My guest today on the follow up is the wonderful Konrad Adderley. Konrad, thank you so much for making yourself available, and welcome to the follow up. We are here today to talk about Francisco Centeno. There was just to give everyone a little bit of a background. During the panel discussion, during the recent panel discussion, Broadway Uncovered Part One, um, we had Konrad Adderley as a guest. We had Ruben Rodriguez as a guest, and we had the great Francisco Centeno as a guest. And when Francisco logged into the discussion, both Konrad and Ruben lit up and said, went into telling everyone how great Francisco was, and naming various songs, and just the fact that he obviously his work had influenced them greatly. Now, what people out there listening and watching should probably know is that both Ruben and you, Conrad, grew up here in the city and are from New York. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm
Oh,
from
excellent.
Bronx. I think Ruben's from East Harlem, I believe.
Right. So the two of you being from the city, you guys were aware of Francisco Centeno to a certain degree, of course. Perhaps not completely, or not. Don't didn't necessarily know all of his recorded work, but you guys were aware that he was out there. Is that right?
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I found out about Francisco right when I started playing bass,
Mm. Okay.
70s, in the late 70s.
Okay.
We had this album in our house by Tom Brown called Brown Sugar.
Okay.
And so I just, you know, kept playing that album. It was like my favorite record.
Mm.
I think Buddy Williams played drums on there. And it was just a really well produced album. And I just played that album over and over and over and over again. And his sound just got into my mind, into my spirit and his groove.
Mm.
And it's like through osmosis. If you listen to something enough, it becomes a part of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Francisco was a very special player because his playing, his bass playing, kind of influenced me on a very deep level because I listened to him so much just on
Right.
the record.
Right.
And, also, the other track that I like was an Ashford and Simpson track called "Don't Cost You Nothing,"
Right.
and his playing on there is very different.
Mm.
You know, he's popping and he's doing his thing, but he has such a personal and special rhythmic feel that
Right.
uh, his bass playing is just phenomenal. You know, he's definitely in the one of the tops for me.
Oh
And
yeah.
you know, basically those two songs I listen to so much that I can honestly say I think I sound a little bit like Francisco Centeno.
Check that out.
You know,
Check that out. That is really deep.
a lot of him. I listen to a lot of Chuck Rainey.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to a lot of Larry Graham, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of Anthony Jackson. All the
Yeah.
old school guys,
Right.
and some of the not so popular ones, but maybe they had a few, you know, songs that were really hot. But Francisco was definitely one of my top guys, you know,
Mm.
and I also felt that, you know, he really didn't get as much recognition as he should.
Right. Right. Yeah, I feel the same. Yeah.
Like I think he came around a little right before Marcus Miller,
Right.
and if you listen to you know, Marcus Miller's playing and you listen to some of Francisco's playing, he was deeply influenced. Marcus was deeply influenced by Francisco.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah. A lot of people say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I hear that as well. That's very true. Yeah.
yeah. And Marcus had his own thing, and he evolved into being his own player, which is a great player.
Yes.
But I hear a lot of his influence. I hear a lot of Francisco's influence.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Miller's playing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
became the big star because he also produced records
Right.
for a lot of pop artists, and he's well deserving. He's like one of the greatest bass players in the world,
Of course. Yeah.
and, and a great composer.
Yeah.
So, but you know, there's a lot of people that came before that. You know, these guys, they're standing on their shoulders, and I would say Francisco is one of them. He's like one of the uh, unsung bass heroes of New York.
Yeah.
He's like a musician's musicians. Like if you're not like on the scene and know about all the heavy cats or whatnot, he may slip through. You may not know who he is.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Most definitely. I noticed.
Sorry, go ahead.
I noticed that. I noticed when I did the video on him about him. I called it "Our Man in Everything" because the minute you start kind of digging into his discography, you realize, oh, wait a second, he did this and then he did that and he recorded with this one and he recorded with that one. And oops, there's another gold record and there's another gold record. Like all of a sudden, you really get more of a picture of, ooh, this guy was incredibly, it was and is incredibly prolific. Like he just never stopped working, never stopped recording. Yet at the same time, he's not a household name, right? He's not a Marcus Miller. He's not, perhaps as well known as he should. Um, so I noticed that the minute I started just doing a little bit of research, and my introduction to Francisco was primarily subbing for him. And just figuring out that, wait a second, the minute he starts playing the bass, everything is, it sounds these bass lines are the kind of bass lines that are, for lack of better description, perfect.
Yeah,
There is nothing that you wouldn't, it sounds just the way you would, if you would imagine it. It sounds like it has always been there, yet he just created it, right?
right.
So I totally get where you're coming from with that. It's yeah, it's quite possible that he never got his due, or perhaps he did. It's really up to him to define that.
It's not a bad or a good thing. Everyone chooses their path. If
Exactly.
you want to become famous, do something that's going to make you famous.
Right. Right.
Playing the bass doesn't necessarily make you famous, but if you're a bass player and you write a hit song, and if you wanted to lead, if you're a member of, like, say, the Rolling Stones or something, you're going to be famous.
Right. Right.
Because you have a much more broader following. But it's not, fame is not what these guys get into it for anyway.
Right.
Great players like that do it because they love it. If
Right.
they become famous, more power to them, and I'm sure it's well deserved. But a lot of these guys, they just play. Like I play because I want to play bass,
Right.
but you know, I'm not getting paid for it now because it's pandemic, and I still practice every day.
Yeah. 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 No, it's almost
Being famous and getting your due, you know, that has its pluses and minuses. But it's like if that's what you want to do, that's what you have to pursue.
right.
And and also Francisco. I mean, I don't know him that well personally. I mean, we've hung out a couple of times. He's a very humble guy.
Yeah.
He's like, he has a great sense of humor.
That's true.
He's not a politician.
No.
So he's just a very unassuming, great individual who just did an extraordinary job at what he does and influenced a whole swath of bass players.
Oh yeah.
Because when he was doing that stuff, man, it's just not me. I mean, every bass player that I know, was like, man, did you hear that track? Did you? I mean, if you play that track, Don't Cost You Nothing Now, I challenge anyone to come up with a track that sounds funkier.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
It's hard pressed. I mean, I think of some songs. I mean, One Nation Under a Groove is pretty funky.
Right.
I mean, Funkadelics, but it's not any more funky than Don't Cost You Nothing. It's like it's got its own level.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
and he's just a great musician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No doubt. No doubt.
Because he just does everything right, and he plays unpredictable stuff. And
Yeah, right there, you're saying something that's really deep because you had these two statements right now. He does everything right, and he's playing unpredictable stuff.
Yeah,
And
exactly. It's like when you, I mean, most people who listen to music know a lot more about music than they realize. And
mm,
because of the history of everyone's vocabulary of music, when we
mm,
listen to music, we can pretty much predict the things that are going to happen in a song.
right,
The verse starts, at the end of every four beats, you're going to get a drum fill
right,
that goes into the next beat. There's a lot of things that happen in music that are just very repetitious. It's the same thing with bass playing. When you're playing something, a bass line, the listener is like expecting you to do something there, and they're kind of expecting how you're going to do it. But Francisco, sometimes like he'll be playing and he'll just come out with something really, it's like wow, unexpected, and it's
mm,
very refreshing. And I think that's what to me makes him special. you know
right,
he doesn't bore you. He's not
yeah,
only a groove master, but he's an unpredictable player uh when playing even the simplest things. So it's like, he's got a lot of things going on for him. So, like I
mm,
said, I'm not the number one Francisco you know, guy to talk to about him. Like
right, right.
Ruben is his very close friend, and he will be able to tell you a lot more about Francisco. But this is just from a guy who's just listened from the side and has like really admired him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's exactly the perspective that I was looking for. That's why I contacted you.
Like
Um,
Pastorius, for instance, you
yeah,
know, he's a very funky bass player.
Pistorius.
Yeah, Pastorius. A lot
Yeah.
of people say, he's a very funky bass player, and he's like world known and famous. In my opinion,
Mm,
Francisco's funkier than
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see that. I mean,
Jocko played a lot of notes and was
yeah,
technically superior to everyone at that
right,
time. But it's not technique that makes you, special. It,
right,
it's technique if you can play cleanly enough.
right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm more impressed with bass players who play less,
Yeah,
but they make you feel more.
right.
You know, like I like Miles Davis type bass players.
Mm,
Miles didn't play a lot of notes,
mm,
but you felt every one of them.
yeah, yeah.
He could play like two or three notes and it sounds better than someone's full solo,
Mm,
you know?
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
these guys, Miles, Francisco, they're masters of space.
Oh, yeah.
They understand that music is not only just sound, but it's the space in between the sound and where you place things that bring about emotion out of people.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Very much so.
To someone, when you talk to someone and they just keep talking and talking and talking and talking, you really can't get any emotion out of it other than
Right.
frustration. But then when someone talks and they leave a space like that, and then they just get into something, it's like, they get your attention.
Yeah.
They get your attention with space.
Right.
And it's much more interesting conversation musically and linguistically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, I totally agree. I totally agree. There's this one track, one of my favorite Francisco tracks is Diana Ross, I Ain't Been Licked. And the track itself is he's slapping and popping, I believe throughout the track. I don't really remember all of it right now, but what caught me with it was it only sounds simple, right? He makes it sound really easy and really smooth, and there's sort of the perfect distribution of notes and space between the notes. All
Right.
of that is really well crafted, right? And then and it moves you, like there's it just the song itself moves you. And I always thought that for what we do for playing the bass, like we are sort of the ones who manipulate the listener's emotions, aside from the singer and aside from the, the various sounds that are happening. But we manipulate emotions. We sort of bring back memories with our sound, with our feel, and all of that is sort of in the bass line that Francisco plays of that in that particular song. It's really very straightforward. It at least it sounds very straightforward. Let me, to be honest. But then the minute you start analyzing it, or the minute you start sort of getting deeper into it, you realize, first of all, you realize you don't know why this song is moving you, but you are being like, your emotions are being manipulated. You don't know what's going on.
Right.
And once you start figuring out, like, okay, or asking the question, why is this moving me? Let me take a look at the bass line, at least, because that's what I learned, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden, like, it just comes at you. The relentlessness, the mixture of sound and space between sounds, all of that is sort of pushing you forward towards an emotion. That's the best way how, like, I'm having a hard time, verbalizing it, or
Oh,
defining it.
yeah.
But that's really it's one of my favorite tracks that he's recorded. And it doesn't, again, it doesn't sound like a lot, but once you get into it, you realize why the track sounds as good as it does, because he is building it from the bottom up. And what he puts out there influences everything that's coming on top of it. So that's just, my 2 cents on that. It is really a fascinating topic, and it's a fascinating discovery to make, that you get, be it from Francisco, or be it from, whoever the player is that sort of speaks to you in that way. It's not relegated to just one player, or one genre, or one style of playing, or one time period, or whatever. It isn't. But it's a deep realization to come to somehow, that all of a sudden you find yourself, wait a second, this is really this. And perhaps this is, something that we can sort of leave this with. It becomes a definition of quality.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. Also, part of the reason why the bass is able to move people emotionally probably a lot more than other instruments is because the frequency of the bass moves the most air.
Yeah.
Out of all the instruments, the bass moves the most air.
Right.
And so that air sort of surrounds you and goes inside your body, just like the air from the guitar. Or,
Mm.
but with the bass, it's more spread out, it's bigger. You can
Hmm.
put your bass speaker in your living room and you can be in the garage
And you still hear it.
bass.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily say that about the guitar
Right.
or even the vocals,
Right.
but you
Right.
will feel that bass no matter what room you're in. And
Right.
that's a tremendous amount of power and something to think about as a bass player, that you really don't have to do a whole lot to make a big impact.
Mm.
It's like the guy with the big, deep voice. He
Right.
only say a few words to make it felt.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
guy with the little tiny voice, he has to just say a whole lot, and to really, the guy with the deep voice, for some reason, he just, yeah, I was going to be. No, no, we don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just, and if you are able to use space and understand how space and sound work together, you can do a lot of creative things with the bass.
Yeah.
And just getting back to Francisco, also, it's a lot, how you play has a lot to do with your personality.
Mm.
The,
Yeah.
the small amount of time that I actually spent with Francisco, he's definitely somebody who has humor. He's a
Oh
very
yeah.
individual, has a great sense of humor, and it shows in his playing.
Yeah.
Little things he does is sometimes very comical. It's like, where did he come up with that? This just doesn't make any sense, but it works.
Right.
And
Right.
and that's what I'm talking about. he surprises you with his playing, his humor in his
Mm.
playing, and
Mm.
that's a gift to have, you know, and it's a wonderful thing.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, you picked a great guy to talk about.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that was it. Was
You know, and matter of fact, if you get a chance, you should really set up a bunch of put a link out there with all his songs on it, so whoever's listening to this.
well, actually, I do that with the live videos. I have I curate these playlists, and I put a bunch of recordings of whoever the subject or whatever the subject is. I put a bunch of songs for that subject into the playlists. So for Francisco, of course, I went to his discography and I talked to Buddy Williams as well, and I talked to a bunch of people, you know, about stuff that he had recorded. And those songs are all in the playlist, absolutely. And people who are watching the live videos can check them out, and you know, can have access to the playlist and all of that. I always do that. And the playlists themselves change as the weeks progress. You know, some songs I take out, you know, some songs I put in. Other people will suggest songs, and I put that into the playlist as well. So that's, yeah, that's been a really cool resource. Also, just for my own, to satisfy my own curiosity. But yeah, Francisco is one of those players. Ruben was one of those players that I featured. Tom Barney was one of the players I featured. Then we had the panel where I kind of tried to feature all of you guys. Um, Also, although that was under the umbrella of a different topic. Um, Let me see, who else did I feature? I invited Buddy Williams for two live videos. Like, one was called An Appreciation of Style, and
Right.
the other one was where he took over the live video and he curated a playlist of songs that stood out in his memory.
Mm,
That's really deep. When
yeah.
Buddy Williams all of a sudden says, you know, okay, that this song influenced me, or when I need to get back into the groove, this is what I listen to, right? To get
Mm.
my head together or whatever. Is that was really deep. That was really deep.
Go-to song.
Say again?
Everybody's got their go-to song.
Oh hell yeah. Hell yeah. Absolutely. Oh, and then, you know, I just uh 3 weeks ago, I don't know if you know this guy, Hubert Eves the fourth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just featured him.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I gotta.
Because sorry, say that again.
I gotta check that out.
Oh yeah, that's a really good episode. He's such a deep cat. He's such a deep cat, and the way he played on that Baduism live album totally made my 90s. Like that was the definition of modern bass playing for me.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, that was, it's really really deep.
One of those guys you really don't hear a whole lot about. You know, I mean, there's so many great musicians.
Oh yeah,
You know, and you know, unfortunately, the music business has been a monopoly,
oh yeah,
and so you don't get an opportunity to really hear a lot of these great players because uh, you know you have just certain groups that always stick to one another. I
hmm,
guess you can call them cliques or whatever.
yeah,
And they basically monopolize the whole music industry. You know, there's no reason why you should have one drummer playing on 300 hits,
right,
you know, when he's not the greatest drummer in the world to begin with,
right,
but he just happens to be in that clique. You know, the work has never really been spread around equitably. And
right.
so a lot of people really, you know, you don't hear about them, but they're out there, they're doing it. And a lot of people don't actually pursue a recording career as well,
Yeah,
you know. So there's a lot of reasons why you don't hear about people, and sometimes people just stay local.
right.
Like the guy that taught me how to play bass, Phil Johnson,
Mm,
you know,
okay.
left-hand bass player that played with a pick. And to me, he was the greatest bass player in the world.
Wow.
I mean, no one could test this guy. And he lived in my building just 2 floors above me. And, you know, he never, no one, you know, he never did anything as far as being in a popular band. Or
Mm,
it's just you'll never, ever hear about. but I heard about him and he taught me. And there's a lot of people out there, and some people just don't pursue the music business for money.
Yeah.
And people, a lot of people just play music because they enjoy it.
Right.
You know, I never wanted to, I never planned on making money as a musician. I just did it because I enjoyed it. And,
Right.
you know, the career comes afterwards if you're lucky.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
What were you subbing with Francisco on? I mean, what you were subbing for him?
I was subbing for him on a show called Soul Doctor.
Soul
Soul
Doc.
Doctor. Yeah, which played in your theater. It played at Circle in the Square.
Okay,
The theater underneath, yeah, underneath the Gershwin Theater.
there for a number of years, right?
Say again?
You talking about next door?
Yeah, right next door to the Gershwin, right?
That's where you. That's where your show was it?
That's where I was there for 3 years with two shows.
3 years, right?
Say again?
I said you had a locker in there for 3 years.
I had a locker in there for 3 years. Yes. But yeah, I subbed for him on Soul Doctor, and he had how we met was that I was doing Memphis at the time,
Right.
and then I got the call to do another show in San Diego. This was in 2010, and Memphis had started either in September or October of 2009, something like that. Yeah, 2009. So Tony season was already over, and uh, we were going to be in the Tony season of 2010. This other gig that I was being offered was going to be, what was it, November going into December or something of 2009. So there was enough. It was like 6 weeks, perhaps something like that. It was 6 to 8 weeks type out of town situation,
Right.
and I needed a sub for Memphis, right? I needed someone who would come in and just nail it night after night. And at the time, Hairspray had closed, and that was Francisco's previous gig, right?
I remember that.
So yeah, Hairspray had closed, and I was calling around, and this, Memphis required you to play with a pick, and it's kind of really loud and aggressive, and you just had to bring it. You just had to be there. And sure enough, Francisco was the one who, sorry, sorry, Francisco was the one who answered the call and said, "Well, wait a second, you're offering me." Because I was offering him the chair, right? I took a leave of absence and he took the chair while I was gone.
Nice.
So he was like, "Wait, you're offering me a month and a half, 2 months of work, 8 shows a week? Yeah, I'm gonna do it." It's- there was no, there was no. It was not. It was is a non discussion. He was like, "Yeah, I gotta play with a pig. No problem."
I
So,
played with a pick.
say again.
I said I didn't know he played with a pick.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm sure he.
So yeah, that's how I met him. And then a couple years later, this is now several years after that, Soul Doctor was at Circle in the Square, and I was looking for subbing jobs. And I called him up, and sure enough, he was kind enough to ask me, to call me in. And I learned the book the way that was in 2013 exactly.
Okay.
And sure enough, like that was the highlight of my 2013, learning the book for Soul Doctor the way Francisco played it. That was incredibly deep, because
A bass lesson.
it was a total bass lesson. It was everything. It was, as we already established, like the mixture of space and notes and articulation and phrasing and emphasis and intensity and everything. Just, you heard it and you were like, of course that's the line that's supposed to be there.
Right.
It sounded like it had always been there. It sounded like you had always heard it. You always heard that music, even though you had never heard the music before,
Right.
right? So there you have it.
Francisco's a singer's bass player. Okay.
Yes.
And there's a difference between a singer's bass player and an instrumentalist bass player,
Yeah.
and he's both really, but he's really a singer's bass player. And
Mm.
because he doesn't get in the way of the vocals
Mm.
with all the things that he does and can do, he seems to stay out of the way of the melody. And not only that, he propels the melody forward
Yeah.
with his playing.
Yeah.
So, that's a talent unto itself.
Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. That's
And kind of like, you know, work it and at the same time stay out of the way of the other instruments and vocals and the
yeah.
melody.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was fascinating. It was so fascinating to learn that book, and that it wasn't necessarily my first introduction to his playing, because I'd been listening to Ashford and Simpson, and I've been listening to some Diana Ross music, not realizing that he was playing on it. um, but it definitely made me want to go in deeper. And as I said, like, I'm not kidding, it was the highlight of my 2013. There's no two ways about that. That it totally, I don't want to say it changed my approach or anything,
You can say
but well, it it reaffirmed like where I was going. It was like, okay, this is where it's at. It became a definition of quality, right? That seems to be something that always comes up with these videos, or with, when I start thinking about it, because
what happened was he raised the bar for you.
yeah,
What happened?
yeah, most definitely, most definitely.
Now it's like you're coming to sub for him, so you don't necessarily have to play exactly like him, but you have to be as satisfying
Yeah,
to the music as he is.
yeah.
People can't come to you and say, well, who played bass last night?
Mm.
They'd be like, okay, this is a different bass player, but he sounded good. So Francisco made you level up.
Oh yeah, oh
And
yeah,
that's the sign of a really good bass player.
oh yeah.
He makes me level up now. When I hear his music, it forces me to pick up my instrument because I'm like, I want to try that.
Mm. Yeah,
He does
yeah,
things that you want to try. You know,
yeah, yeah, most definitely. That's that.
yeah. So
Yeah, no, that's every time. That's inspiration, motivation. That's like, all of a sudden you want to go. You just want to do it. Because you hear some. Sorry, say it again.
guys like that are great for getting you to practice.
Oh yeah,
If you're having a hard time getting to your instrument, just simply put on one of their tracks, and within seconds, you're like, oh no, it ain't going down like this, you know? And you pick up your instrument, and before you know it, hours gone by, and you got your practicing.
yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Bass players and musicians in general out there,
Right.
if you have a difficult time getting to the practice room, because you don't always want to practice, especially if you practice a lot. Sometimes you can burn out from
Yeah.
practice. There's been times where I just practiced so much I just burnt out and I stopped playing.
Right.
And what gets me back in is always a funky bass line.
Mm.
No matter
Yeah.
what I'm in, I'm like, oh man, I got to try that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. 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 Most definitely.
Yeah. So,
Mm.
just listen to people that inspire you, and that will get you right back into the swing of things.
Yeah. 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 Well, and clearly, someone like Francisco, is someone who inspires you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, Conrad, thank you so much for making yourself available, for sharing your thoughts with me, sharing them with the audience. This is a great resource. It's definitely a great resource for myself, but it seems to be a really good resource for the audience out there to get these different perspectives on a variety of topics. And this time around, the subject was Francisco Centeno. You hear certain things in his playing. I hear certain things in his playing. And that is something that I think we should share. And I want to thank you once again for making yourself available, and just going on this sort of informational ride with us. I truly appreciate it, and I know that people out there are totally into this.
Well, thanks for inviting me to the show, George. This was great, and keep up the good work, dude.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, you got it. Thanks again.
You got it.
All right.